So, my name is Erik Murdock. I'm the policy director for the Access Fund. This is Ty Tyler. He's the stewardship director. My background is in actually geology as well as natural resource management. And I've worked for the BLM, for the Park Service, NOAA, and a variety of other government organizations that have been sort of dealing with climate management issues for almost 2 decades. And Ty's background is in recreation management. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of climate management plans.
No, we don't have time. No time.
No?
No, you don't want to run.
All right.
This is what you do. You just start talking. Yeah, people have time. You know, people are short time. A little bit more about my background as well. I have a forestry degree, and then I've worked a lot with nonprofits, with outdoor recreation and collaborative efforts. But I'm going to jump in and just kind of really quickly. For those of you that don't know who the Access Fund is, we're basically the U.S. national advocacy organization that keeps climbing areas open, protects the climbing environment. Founded in 1991, we represent about 6.8 million climbers in the United States. And we do all of our work through basically 6 core programs. Listed there, we do education, stewardship and conservation, climbing policy and advocacy, a little local sport, risk management, and some land acquisition as well. So basically, we're going to jump in really quickly on that 6.8 million. So if you look at this our nice little slide, in 1994, there were about 350,000 climbers. It's 20 years ago. Now we're looking at about 6.8 million. It's 20 times the growth in 20 years. Pretty big growth. Lots of new climbers, lots of new people out there. In addition to that, we have more than 20,000 different climbing sites in the United States. This is off a mountain project, so we know that there's basically 20,000 on mountain project. We know that there's even more because there's a lot of stuff that isn't on mountain project. This is a really nice dispersion. It's a really nice map. Nice job, Eric, pulling that together. And then in addition, like what's leading up to all that sort of stuff is we've seen an explosion of indoor climbing. I mean, basically more than 4,300 people are filling out digital waivers each day at climbing gyms across the United States. And those are just climbing gyms. We have more than 1,400 different climbing facilities. And by climbing facilities, I mean climbing gyms, university facilities, the YMCAs, all these different facilities are starting to bring climbing in. You go to festivals, they have those mobile walls that are kind of going. So climbing is everywhere. In 2013, there was a 10% increase in indoor climbing facilities. There's about 36 that are scheduled to open just this year alone. So it's exploding more and more. In addition to that, we have a lot of media embracing the climbing community. We have Citibank commercials with Alex Honnold talking about climbing shoes. We have National Geographic covering that. We have women's health magazines talking about the benefits of climbing, whether it's flexibility or physical fitness. So it's everywhere. Everybody's doing climbing. Everyone's kind of going climbing, this and that. In addition to that, we have a real change in the climbing culture going on. We've got the old timers that are kind of scruffy looking, really dirty, making their own gear, throwing their babies around, just all that sort of stuff that they used to do back in the day, as opposed to the climbers of today. This is the climber of today. A lot of them are urban-based. They're coming from the urban environment. They're coming from New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C. They're going to these places like Indian Creek. They're buying their $80,000 Sprinter vans, and they're kind of going out there. They're not really dumpster diving anymore. Some of them are, but most of them are trying to go to Starbucks to get their latte, go to the fancy breweries. They're all spending money. It's a very, very different environment. And there's just so much of them, and there's so many, and I mean, it's a direct impact on the ground.
Hold on. That's not exactly true. What you're saying isn't right.
I don't know if I can.
Well,
tell me different.
More climbers doesn't necessarily mean more impact. Because we know impact is really a function of the intensity. It's the amount of climbers that we have, but it also has to do with the type of use. What are they doing? Are they out doing alpine climbing? Are they bouldering? Are they sport climbing? Where, and the third variable is where are they doing it? What is the ecosystem like? And all these different ecosystems are unique, and all of them are susceptible to different types of impacts. So really, the intensity, this number of climbers that Ty is talking about, is only one of the components of this impact. And this impact, or sometimes just the perceived impact, is really what's causing these issues. And what we're going to talk about for the rest of this discussion is how climbing management plans can be created, what's involved in a climbing management plan, and how So how do land managers even come up with what to do? How do they come up with what kind of activity, what kind of management action they should take? Well, it has to do with a couple different things. One, it has to do with the climbers. What are the climbers doing? What's the relationship with the climbing community? Who are the land managers? Is it private land? Is it public land? What is the mandate of that agency or that piece of land? And then how much money do they have? And those are the basics for what decides what type of management activities are done. The basic, the equation for success for management actions are this buy-in between the land manager and the climbing community. If there isn't buy-in from both the land manager and the climbing community, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to have a climbing management plan in the first place. But interestingly, most areas don't have climbing management plans. And that's kind of why we have a job. That's why Ty and I are in business. So an interesting thing, and I'll ask a question to you guys, is how many climbing management plans do you think the Forest Service has right now in the country? The Forest Service, by the way, probably owns more climbing areas than any other landowner in the entire United States. How many climbing management plans? One climbing management plan, never run me. So there's loads, thousands of climbing areas that don't have climbing management plans. And we're having these issues, and we get calls every day from Montana, from Idaho, from all sorts of places where climbing management managers are saying, what am I supposed to do with this issue? How do I resolve this issue? And climbers give us the same calls. How do we deal with this? So let's just talk really quickly about the climbing management plans that are in place. So we have climbing management plans that might be really large. Like for example, use this. This one over here is the New River Gorge National River. It's a Park Service unit. And this is a climbing management plan that's 200 pages long, took years to create, and it involved the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act. You have to go through a large process, get public input at various steps in the process, and they created this really long climbing management plan that suits what New River Gorge needs. In contrast, we can have a climbing management plan like this. This is where the Gunks is, the Mohawk Preserve, and it's a preserve, a private preserve in New York, and this is a 3-page climbing management plan. It doesn't deal with the same environmental issues that the New River Gorge plan deals with. This one deals mostly with commercial use and other activities that might affect what they have to deal with. So the point of this slide is that different climbing management plans deal with different issues. And when people create climbing management plans, they want to keep in mind that you should only deal with the issues that you have to deal with. So you can have a 3-page climbing management plan or a 200-page climbing management plan. And it really depends on the land manager, the type of use, and the climbers involved. So how do you get the information to base this climbing management plan on in the first place? An important thing about information is that some people have perceptions about what's going on, and then there's actual data. You want to write the climbing management plan. You want the climbing management plan to be based on facts, what's actually happening. So instead of writing about what you perceive or what you think might be happening, you have to actually come out and get some information. It's kind of like when you're driving on the highway, and everyone who passes you is a maniac, and everyone who stalls you down is an idiot. Everyone sort of talks about these things as how they perceive it. But it might be really important to go out and actually characterize what is exactly going on. So let me use an example of Joshua Tree National Park. In Joshua Tree National Park in 1997, they banned the use of fixed anchors because they didn't know what was going on. And the Sierra Club and other environmental wilderness advocates were coming in and saying, hey, these climbers are going out there and they're bolting up the place and it doesn't really suit the wilderness and we're really afraid of the impacts associated with the climbers. From the climbers' perspective, you know, we're walking around on our tippy toes and we're not doing any damage. And when we sat down to have these discussions about how to manage climbing and how to manage fixed anchors specifically, the discussions weren't going anywhere. So what happened was that the National Park decided to collaborate with some universities and also the Access Fund, and they supported one of the largest climbing investigations in history. And over 2.5 years, we went out and inventoried, this is a picture right here of the wilderness, the Joshua Tree Wilderness. I should preface that Joshua Tree, for people who don't know, is in Southern California. It's a national park. It has over 8,000 climbs, so it's probably one of the largest climbing areas in the world in terms of the number of actual routes in a contiguous area. And we went out and we actually inventoried all of the climbs and all of the fixed anchors in the wilderness. And this map right here shows in red the intensity, the number of fixed anchors at every site. So the bigger the dot, the more fixed anchors. The smaller the dot, the fewer fixed anchors. Then we also went out and measured the people. We did some visitor use modeling. Where are the people going? And one of the things that was really important for the discussion was, how do fixed anchors interact with people? How do they attract people to get to a certain place? And what we found was something really interesting, is that these circles right here, these buffer zones right here, represent where people are going. And once again, these red dots represent where the fixed anchors are. And as you can see, the people aren't exactly being drawn to all of the fixed anchors. So what attributes are actually drawing the climbers into these areas, and what is causing them to go to certain places? Well, it turns out that the quality of the climb, the grade of the climb, and of course the distance from the trailhead is what's really driving it. And the fixed anchors aren't the things that are actually driving where climbers are going. So this way, using this type of information, the climbers and the land manager and wilderness advocates can all go sit at the table and put this map down and say, okay, let's use this as a basis for this plan, for coming up with a plan.
For those internationally who might not, or non-climbers who might not know about fixed anchors, maybe explain a little bit what the issue is.
Good point. I assume that everyone knows about fixed anchors because I deal with it so much. Thanks for asking that question. Fixed anchors are any piece of climbing gear that's left behind on a climb to ascend or descend. It could be a sling, piton, a bolt, or anything else that's left behind. So fixed anchors are one of the most contentious issues because it's one of these things that has a lot of impact on the land from the land manager's perspective. It's something that we actually can leave behind, and cause a lot of conflict. So from a wilderness advocate's perspective, this is a very important issue to discuss. Thanks for asking that question. In contrast, I'll talk about an issue really briefly, and another example of an issue where the land manager and the climbers don't have a lot of information. And I use this example right here. This is Cochise Stronghold. This is a climbing area in southern Arizona, kind of near where I live. And it's an example of a system, of a climbing system, where there's not a lot of information that's causing a lot of issues. In this situation here, 40 years has gone on since climbing has been developed in Cochise Stronghold. Climbers have sort of taken it upon themselves to self-manage. Some climbers have decided to use a higher impact style of climbing, and others have chosen a less impactful form of climbing. Climbers have managed themselves and have had very little relationship with the land manager. There's actually been no rangers in Cochise Stronghold for many, many years. So the setup is that the Forest Service doesn't exactly know what's going on. There's no map, there's no inventory, there's no information that they can discuss. Currently, the Forest Service is revising their plan for this area. In fact, when they did an assessment of Cochise Stronghold, they didn't even include climbers. They don't know how much is there, they don't know what's going on. And they've proposed, or are thinking about proposing, to create a wilderness area, turn this into a wilderness. Now, wilderness is a land designation, a legal designation that protects the environment and also comes with certain restrictions on different types of activities, such as climbing. The issue right here is that the land managers and the climbers have not been working together, and it's created a lot of conflict because there's no information to discuss on the table. So right here, I write, sensitive and complex issues and land management concerns and stakeholder conflicts are all evident in this area, and it's creating an issue that could very well be resolved with the building blocks for a climbing management plan. So to summarize, a climbing management plan can build cooperative relationships between climbers and managers, get the information on the table, and get climbers and managers speaking the same language. The second thing climbing management can do is provide management direction that allows managers to implement a fair and effective policy that's also the minimum necessary. The land manager wants to implement the least impactful management style, but they have to protect the resources, and climbers are interested in that also. A climbing management plan can also lay on the table the statutory requirements for the land manager, for the agency, and that way the climbers know what they are obligated to do, and the land manager is also transparent with what they have to do. provide information on climbing activity, contextual use patterns, like what happened in Joshua Tree, and the effects of climbing activity on identified resource values. So a climbing management plan can actually lay out, here are the natural resource issues that climbers might affect. Here are the different types of use patterns, like in Joshua Tree. And here's information about how, the type of use that climbers are doing on that particular land. And then lastly, but perhaps most importantly, a climbing management plan can describe the climbing opportunities, can describe the climbing area as an asset. It can describe the climbing area as an asset that the land monitor really wants to protect and really wants to value in itself. So what a climbing management plan can do is it can increase compliance, basically get buy-in from the climbers to do the right thing, and the result is that it's going to be better for climbers, better for land managers because there's higher compliance, and in the end, most importantly, it's better for the environment, for conservation, because everyone's on the same page. So Ty's going to talk a little bit about the elements of a climbing management plan.
I worked with Erik's daughter last night to draw this up while we were putting the presentation together. I think she did a really good job. Something that's really great about a climbing management plan is that they can be set up to address any any of the elements or all of it of like what we refer to as the climbing system. And what I mean by that is basically everything that kind of goes into what goes on in a climbing area. So you have the parking where everybody's parking, you have bathrooms, you have kiosk information, you have that sort of stuff. You have the approach, which is basically the trail that kind of goes to a climbing area. You have the staging area where people are dropping their gear, they're dropping the rope, they're setting up to go bouldering, they're setting up to go multi-pitch climbing. Then you have the climb itself, the summit, and then you have the different descent options, whether it be the use of fixed anchors on a rappel or a walk-off route or something along those lines. And then you also have the camping and the bivvy sites. All these different elements can be covered in a climbing management plan. And in each one, you can actually jump into some of the different really kind of fine-tuning sorts of things of ecological issues, some cultural resources, social issues, and then some of the really site-specific sort of stuff. And you can kind of dive into each one of these in the climbing management plan. You can dive into wildlife, where we all know that wildlife interactions just aren't in the high alpine when you're doing multi-pitch routes. A lot of the times we're right there in the front country when you're climbing right off the road at a bouldering site or something like that. This picture was taken at a bouldering site in Joshua Tree about, 50 feet off the road or something like that. Really, really close by. And what's great about a climbing management plan is that you can actually kind of go in and come up with some of these implementation processes working with the climbing coalitions, the climbing groups, instead of being reactionary where, oh my God, we have something going on, we need to react. In a climbing management plan, you can actually really define some of the parameters and some of the solutions for that. This was a somewhat reactionary sort of thing here in Boulder Canyon outside of Boulder. There's golden eagle nesting, but the Forest Service is working with the local climbers on some basically self-policing sort of stuff. And then there were some violations of the closures, and then the climbing community had to step up and put even more aggressive signage of like, hey, we need to do this sort of thing. But in the climbing management plan, we could actually address those on a broader scale. In addition, we also have vegetation issues as well. As folks are interacting with the ground, we actually have some vegetation laws as people are climbing, going in and out. And we can work on these climbing management plans towards solutions on revegetation processes and restoration work and that sort of stuff, and actually kind of do things like this where we're doing revegetation. Same thing with some of the different soils, soil compaction, once again, plant degradation, high erosion kind of stuff like that. I mean, a lot of this stuff is human caused, and you've got social trails kind of going all over the place. But with a climbing management plan and all these management plans, you can actually start to delineate some of these routes so that people will stay on one single trail as opposed to going all over the place. And then in addition, you can also react to natural issues that are basically being caused by the surrounding environment itself. This is in a state park in Pennsylvania where there's a natural seep that continuously runs basically throughout the entire year, even higher during rainstorms. But we've gone in, worked with the state park there to kind of come up with a management plan of how to get the water off of the trail so it actually is no longer eroding, causing an issue long term. So it's just another thing that we can actually kind of make some of these improvements and make some of these areas more sustainable by actually working together. Obviously, we have cultural and archaeological sites all across America and everywhere where we want to make sure that those heritage sites are preserved so we can do these sorts of management plans. These are all, sorts of things that we can do. We've got archaeological sites, a prime example. is Waco Tank State Park in Texas, which has just like, I can't remember, it's like 8,000 different like pictographs and archaeological specific sites throughout the park. But the recreational user groups and the park management have come to, they went through a long process to come up with management strategies to actually allow people into the park while maintaining these resources long term. It's just been kind of one of those sorts of things. And then, working together, coming up with those plans, you can actually come up to those deliverables, those implementation sort of strategies. This is a kiosk panel that the climbers and the local Bureau of Land BLM staff out in Bishop, California worked together on the coming up for the language of this sort of thing up in the Happies and the Sats, a really popular bouldering site. But they worked with the climbers to come up with the language so that it would actually speak to the climbing community who actually uses this resource more than anybody else, so that they can protect these cultural and archaeological sites. And then there's always social issues as well.
I'll talk a little bit about social issues. I've worked as a social scientist for over a decade on issues like this, and a variety of different social issues are difficult to quantify. It's difficult sometimes to actually measure. It's easy to observe them, but it's difficult to measure and document how to manage these sorts of issues. So here's some potential issues that a climbing management plan might address. You might have to address crowding issues. You might have to address human waste issues, and I know that this conference last year dealt with human waste issues. You might have to deal with visual impact. This is an example of in Red Rocks, the chalk being a potential visual impact to other users. You might have to deal with search and rescue. Your Yosemite, a climbing management plan might have to deal with search and rescue operations and how they're going to handle people getting hurt or lost. And perhaps most prevalent these days is the issue of fixed anchors, these pieces of climbing gear that are left behind. And climbing management plans, that's probably the call I get the most, is how do we deal with these fixed anchors? And it might range between a state park in Minnesota or a state park in Iowa, calling us up and saying, hey, how do we deal with these bolts? Or it might be a national park, like in North Cascades or in Lake Mead, asking the climbing community, asking themselves, how should we deal with these fixed anchors? A climbing management plan, I don't want to go into fixed anchor, the details about fixed anchors, about these climbing gear that's left behind, but it's important to recognize that every climbing management plan, every site-specific location has a different perspective on how to view these types of social issues. The National Park Service might be looking at fixed anchors in terms of how do fixed anchors affect the wilderness character? How do they affect the experience and perhaps the environment? Whereas a state park might be looking at it as, we're not as interested in how it affects the environment. What we're really interested in is how do we keep from getting sued? How do we address fixed anchors in terms of liability? So a great example is Hawaii. Right now, climbing is banned in Hawaii because of liability concerns. We're working with the Attorney General's office and the Department of Natural Resources in Hawaii to try to figure out how to build this climbing management plan specific to fixed anchors in order to address the issue of liability. It's in sharp contrast to the projects we're doing in North Cascades and Lake Mead, where we're trying to understand how fixed anchors are affecting wilderness character itself. So this is a great example of how different social issues combined with different the site specificity and the land manager needs is sort of dictating what will actually be addressed in the climbing management plan.
So as Eric deals with, his main phone call that he gets is a lot about the fixed anchors. Me, I get, oh God, we're having tons of erosion. Oh man, we're having tons of this, we're having tons of that. Impacts on the ground itself. And a lot of my stuff is a lot of like the site-specific improvements and restoration work and management work. So there's just a ton of different strategies that we can do. This is working through a riparian zone. We basically set up a highline, so we don't go anywhere near the riparian zone. We're fixing up this climbing area in Idaho, right off. It's like one of their prime parks there in Idaho, and they just called us up and they're like, oh, let's fix that sort of stuff. But a lot of the stuff is really, really site-specific. And a climbing management plan, what's really great is that they're really specific to a certain area, so you can actually customize them to make them really specific. So you can actually, you have a certain issue, you can actually kind of go for that. It's a different issue than somewhere else. these types of things, we can actually do some of the improvements, site-specific improvements, in a variety of different ecosystems. The approach trails. We can improve these approach trails and make them so that they're a lot more sustainable long-term. They're easier for folks to follow. We have less grading, less erosion, less soil compaction, less vegetation loss. These are all implementations that can be done with a climate management plan. I mean, you've got some before and after pictures here of just work that's kind of been done across the country. And, I mean, these sites are, you know, they're climbing specific, but yet they can be managed just like most other recreational user groups. You know, we've got, you know, bouldering is a really, really site-specific sort of thing where we're looking at the bouldering pad platforms where people put their bouldering pads. I mean, they're custom built so that they're long-term sustainable, there's no longer further erosion, and there's also safety improvements. This particular site here, the climb that this gentleman on, they actually abandoned it about 5 years ago because the landing site was so dangerous that they didn't want to go anywhere near it. And the local land manager was like, wow, this is really dangerous. Why are people doing it? So they asked us to improve it. We went in to improve it. The climbers are like, wow, we totally forgot that this climb existed. So they got right back on it. Now it's all chalked up and whatever else. But it's a long-term sustainable, you know, and now it's a sustainable landing. There's not going to be any more erosion. And actually, you know, folks are using it and the land managers are thrilled by it. It's just a really site-specific sort of stuff. Other examples, we can handle a lot of these different restoration projects and a lot of these, you know, trail improvements. I mean, we're looking at basic trail improvement at a lot of these sites or stewardship work, but a climate management plan can kind of dictate that and allow that sort of stuff, facilitate it to happen a little bit faster of a progress so we can actually move forward on some of these improvements. But at the end, it boils down to really two things as we're developing these climate management plans. It's a lot of partnerships. A couple of ones that, you know, we've been working on fairly recently. On the left-hand side, we're doing a fundraiser next week in Boulder. But the Access Fund has been working with a local climbing organization in Salt Lake City, the Forest Service, BLM, county in Utah, and the state of Utah, and a long-term management plan development for Joe's Valley, which is a really premier bouldering site. We've been kind of leading that group of folks, and we're all looking long-term out. Okay, we need to come up with a climbing management plan. We need to look at infrastructure. We need to look at camping. We need to look at the trailheads, the human waste issues, camping, the staging areas, all this sort of stuff, the trails that kind of go there. We're actually developing that plan as it is, but working alongside the climbers and also the different folks that are involved. Another one, the one on the right, is Pinnacles National Park in southern-ish California, where we, you know, put together that climber appreciation day. And it says climber appreciation, but it was more that the climbers appreciate pinnacles. So they've come in and we worked alongside one of the park staff to do some improvements underneath some of their management plans. Not necessarily a climbing management plan, but their recreation management plan. And Erik in his gorgeous little hat, works alongside the Park Service all the time on different issues. I don't know what this one was about that you were just posing. Is that
Joshua Tree Fix Anchors.
Little Joshua Tree Fix Anchors thing. So once again, it's all based on partnerships, working together collaboratively toward these different efforts. Another example is right outside of Salt Lake City. This is Little Cottonwood Canyon, premier climbing area. The local climbers worked alongside the Forest Service to come up with a long-term management plan for this specific area, where they're actually going to go in and they're going to remove an old mill site right here and develop about 4.5 miles of new trail specific for climbing. It's not necessarily under the climbing management plan, but it was specific for this climbing area. They're going to, you know, it's trails to the crags, trails to the bouldering sites, improved bouldering landing sites, a whole new parking lot with restrooms, multi-use trail access. It's just another where they work together. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened without the climbers. And implementation will be alongside the climbing community and then a bunch of other folks as well. And then, you know, at the end, it all kind of boils down to a lot of education. We need to educate the people that are going to these places on the different parameters of the climbing management plan or whatever management strategies we're taking on. Once again, you see this sign again, it's kind of an education piece. Some kiosk information. This was done for out in the Joe's Valley. We were able to actually put in some kiosks and start doing some education out there as well. And then there's, you know, basic education that the Access Fund works on as well. We have, you know, an education program ourselves, and it's a lot about how folks are going to interact with the environment out there. Their etiquette on the ground, their ethics on the ground, as far as like, oh, you know, we can't, you know, the things that, you know, what's wrong with this picture? It's kind of focused for the youth, but it's like, hey, don't do this stuff when you go to an area, or some different other things like we did the human waste thing, but this was a really great graphic of poop. Like, you know, everybody poops. do it, and how are we going to do it sensibly and manage for that sort of stuff. So, I mean, just, you know, some other stuff, a lot of people don't quite understand why they can't throw their banana peels out on the ground or orange peels and stuff. Land managers look at that stuff as trash instantly, and it degrades what, you know, their perception is that it degrades the area. But you also have poop bags that last 10 to 20 years and all that sort of stuff. So it's once again, it's educating the climbers, getting in front of them on those different management strategies, on those different solutions. Obviously, you know, a couple more examples as well. And then, you know, finally, along with that education is a lot of the outreach, is working with the different climbing groups, the different folks that are out there as far as getting the word out as far as what's happening. If you're going through a climbing management plan, the climbers are willing to make comments and work alongside. We use things called action alerts to kind of get people motivated to be like, oh, we have to pay attention to this sort of thing. Access alerts as well. And then we also do, you know, a ton of events throughout everywhere across the country as far as we'll do climbers coffee, as a lot of folks have, you know, in the U.S. have probably seen. Joshua Tree does and Yosemite does, where we'll bring coffee, and then the climbers and the land managers can talk together about different issues that they want to see, that they're seeing, that they want to improve upon, and that sort of thing. I think that's all we have. That's all we got.
That's it.
That's all we got. That's it.
So if you have any questions,
Yeah.
we're up, and we also brought our friend Maura Longton, who's sort of a National Park Service specialist in this type of thing. So if you have specific questions about federal agencies, we'll direct you to Maura. Yes.
Are these the plans that you've already finished easily accessible on your website for you? I mean, how easy is it for
Good question.
people to look at
So you can,
samples?
so we have climbing management plans are, you can always Google an area. For example, if you want to find a climbing management plan for Pennsylvania, if you Google climbing management plan Pennsylvania, it'll come up. However, we have a website that we're developing called climbingmanagement.org, climbingmanagement.org, and we're currently revamping it, but it has a list of all of the current climbing management plans sorted by agency and also state. So if you have a certain climbing area that you want to look for, you can search for it by state and try to find a climbing management plan if it's available for that. So that's a clearinghouse for all things climbing management. There are most of the climbing management plans up there right now. We have a couple interns who are helping revamp that site, and hopefully by October it'll be really dialed in for the Wilderness 50 conference. But currently you can find probably 95% of the climbing management plans on climbingmanagement.org.
I just want to add to that, that site was a product of meetings, workshops that were attended by not only land managers, the Access Fund, other partners. There's been different meetings along the way every few years that brings climbing managers together for conversation and relationship building, which I think has been invaluable. And so this site was set up as a cooperative effort. And you'll find that the agencies have, and that's part of my responsibility, is to funnel the climbing management plans that are available onto that site so they're available for the public. I also kind of have a similar role that Erik has here, except that I get called by agency people more about, we have this problem, this issue, should we be concerned? Can you provide an example of another place that's dealing with the same issue? For example, cultural resources or a fixed anchor issue or something like that. So I play the role of that agency rep that helps on the ground as well as management on up to the national level. But that climbing.org is true, management.org is true.
Thanks. And by the way, for land managers who have questions about how those climbing management plans came to be, there's also a slew of research on climbingmanagement.org. So if you're dealing with an issue about raptors, you can go onto climbingmanagement.org, and there are it's a clearinghouse for information about raptor issues. So if you're concerned about cultural resources, there are some things about that. So we're trying to compile all of that research and get it in one place. So it's not only a place where you can find out about climbing management plans, but also how they were built, such as the information that we imparted in this presentation.
Right. Where was that bolt ladder and why was it illegal?
Yeah, good question. That bolt ladder was in Joshua Tree in the wilderness, and it was right next to, well, it didn't matter where it's right next to, but it was right next to a really classic crack climb. And at the time, bolts were Joshua Tree, and basically someone went up and from the ground put up a bolt ladder with a power drill right next to an established climb in wilderness. So it was a real easy decision for the Park Service to remove that bolt ladder because bolts were banned, power trails were banned, bolt-intensive sport climbs were banned. So on a lot of different levels, that wasn't a good thing. So the Park Service reached out to the climbing community and talked about what to do with it, and the climbing community and the Park Service decided that the best thing to do was to remove the bolt ladder. So that was kind of a no-brainer in a lot of different ways, but that's an end-member example, and a lot of times what to do with the fixed tankers is a lot more of a gray area, and that goes to what sort of, if you're interested in those sorts of issues, we can look at what's happening in North Cascades, for example, where the Park Service removed some fixed tankers because they thought it was problematic with the wilderness, inside the wilderness, and the climbing community thinks otherwise. So that would be an example of a conflict, whereas the example I put up about in Joshua Tree is an example of where the climbing community and the land managers sort of came together.
Russ?
Just want to know the difference between general management plan and this management plan.
You're asking what's the difference between a climbing management plan and other management plans?
No, I think there should be something like general management plans, general management plans, and here you have very specific
Yeah.
just about it.
That-
Planning management.
So there are general management plans and climbing management plans, and can I speak to what is the difference and what's the relationship? That's a good question. Sometimes when, depending on the land manager, a land manager really needs a very specific climbing management plan. And a lot of times that is an area, for example, that's private or a small state agency where they have specific climbing issues. What we find in the federal government, for example, the Forest Service that owns the most climbing areas, there's only one climbing management plan in Romney. And so why is that? Why don't they have climbing management plans? They have land and resource management plans, they have wilderness plans, but why aren't there more climbing management plans? The answer to that is manifold. One, it's really difficult to get a climbing management plan together. You have to have buy-in from the climbers, you have to have buy-in from the land managers, you have to have the time and the money to do it. But the other reason is because you can often sync climbing management issues into another plan. You can put a climbing management section into a backcountry management plan, or you can put a climbing management section into a wilderness management plan. So it becomes sort of an embedded climbing management plan. In the Park Service, they do that. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit in more detail.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think you'll often find, or probably more so in the future, you'll find climbing direction embedded in another plan, such as a general management plan, a wilderness stewardship plan. One of the reasons is cost and process and time, is that the agencies don't want these unfunded mandates create a climbing management plan, especially for a park that has a small amount of climbing. That's a big effort, and not all places are staffed even with people that are out there on the ground climbing rangers. Some of the bigger parks that we think of, yeah, they've got staff, they're doing monitoring, they have a certain amount of baseline, they have anecdotal as well as institutionalized knowledge, and then they're doing their science on the ground. That's not the norm if you look at the number of federal land areas that have climbing. So I know that's confusing if you're a user or someone who wants to participate in a planning process. Which way do you go? You get in touch with your local climbing area and say, how are you going to address this? I know Erik probably gets these calls too, and I do, where something will show up and it's simply like a regulation saying you can't climb on this particular formation, or you can't put fixed anchors in this area. And it seems very random and kind of knee-jerk reaction, but that's typically not the end of discussion. It's usually a stopgap measure to get more information and develop an approach from there, typically. So it comes in a lot of varieties. It's not always just a climbing management plan. And I think, I'll predict that you'll see less individual climbing management plans in the future. Part of it is because we take into consideration these other resources, wildlife, cultural effects, water quality, all these different things, which are addressed in a larger umbrella plan.
So that was a great question. And from a federal standpoint, I think that's the direction we're going.
sites in the country, what percentage of those you think are actually covered in a management plan with some specific language about, some thoughtful process about finding impacts and use levels and things like that? Yeah, yes.
Don't know the answer to that. I can give you a couple other numbers. It's a very small percentage. Very small percentage of the climbing sites are covered. I would say that about 50% of the climbing areas in the United States are on federal land. And you can sort of back out, we only have one Forest Service climbing management plan, and we've got a bunch of Park Service ones, but about 50% of the climbing is on federal land. So back when the government shutdown occurred, it affected 50% of the climbing areas, but a very small percentage are sort of have a climbing management plan that's clarifying those types of issues.
And on that website that you mentioned, how many roughly climbing plans dedicated to this?
Yeah, there's probably about 25 or 30. Yeah.
There's quite a few, I won't take up too much time here, there's quite a few more plans or guidance documents being developed as a result of policy for wilderness areas, and specifically for the National Park Service, the policy, the director's order being signed in May last year, requires that parks with significant climbing within wilderness develop direction and an authorization process for fixed anchors. So there are things in the works now where parks were waiting for that national direction, which just provides the sideboards, and now the specifics will come from that park, because it's not a one-size-fits-all.
And I think to answer back to you, Erastus, from Kilimanjaro, these guys, the three of these folks would be great resources for you for developing something. Maybe